I welcome you all, and I'm so excited to be able to, just offer another means of support and encouragement to families that are either just receiving diagnosis or need to, figure out how to navigate what the next step is for their child on this journey. So
Beverly,
what I'm going to do is I will ask you to mute yourself if you haven't already.
How do you mute your sound?
And what we're going to do, we have 4 panelists, and you may have read the little description that I posted earlier, but we have Rhonda with Bella Grace, we have Terry with Chrissy, and Jennifer with Mr. Danny, and Deanna with Grace. And so I want to thank these ladies, first of all, for stepping up and kind of forging a little bit of new territory with doing this. We didn't really practice anything. We didn't talk a whole lot other than, hey, let's provide this opportunity for parents to listen in and hear our stories, hear what's pertinent about this topic, and then be able to ask some questions and get some answers. So I'm going to give each of them, we talked about maybe 5 to 7 minutes or so. So they're going to introduce their child to you and tell you a little bit about that trach journey, what maybe led to them getting it, what complications there were. I know we have a variety of stories, so it works out really great that you're going to get some different perspectives today. And then if you think of a question while they're talking, type it into the chat, because we are definitely going to go back through and pick up those questions, but then we'll have a chance for you to verbalize back and forth and ask questions for the final half hour or so. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start just because on my screen it's the top left. Rhonda, you're the first one, you and Bella Grace. So if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and share your story with us.
Hey everybody, my name's Rhonda. I've been a nurse for almost 20 years. Bella Grace is our 4th child. She's just turned 5 in February. And we knew about her trisomy 18 before she was born. And she had heart surgery for a VSD, ASD repair when she was about 3.5 months old. And well, let me go back first. She was born with an esophageal atresia and a TE fistula. And if you're not familiar with that, that's where your esophagus is not connected to your stomach. And there's also little connections between your esophagus and your trachea to each other. So it can cause you to have aspiration issues and things like that. So she had that all repaired at 7 days old. With that causes the airway to be floppy and have Malaysia issues that are already, she probably already had some Malaysia just from having trisomy 18. And then that surgical site caused an exacerbation to that Malaysia. So when she went in for her heart surgery and they intubated her, she had that TE fistula repair pushed open. So it took them a couple weeks after she had her heart surgery to figure out why she kept failing extubation and having to be put on CPAP and everything. So they finally figured out they had to open that fistula back up, and she had to go back in and have another repair done. So from there, she remained intubated, and she had to be paralyzed and sedated and everything like that. So we had to make the choice, were we going to give her a trach or not? We were super against the trach. We were so scared. Even as a nurse, I just couldn't imagine having a child with a trach. I had taken care of adult patients with trachs, and I just couldn't see myself being the mother of a child with a trach. So, but it pretty much, we pushed and pushed to have the pulmonologist and the ENTs give us the proof, does she really need this trach? Or are you guys just pushing the trach on us? We need to see the proof. So they bronched her and they showed us, yes, she did. And our cardiothoracic surgeon basically came in and he said, if you don't give her a trach and you extubate her and she has to be intubated again, her airway could get tore up and she could die. Like, she was such a hard intubation to begin with because she had such a small jaw and a really tiny airway. So it was just dangerous as it was. So we said, trach her, we're good. You've convinced us, we're good. And she got the trach and we learned how to do everything. And after we learned everything, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the easiest thing ever. I'm like, this is so much better than I thought it was going to be. They thought she would be vent dependent because of how severe her malacia was in her trachea and her bronchial tubes. But she weaned off the vent within a week and never looked back. We never had to depend on a vent again. She left the hospital with oxygen, but that was more related to pulmonary hypertension that she developed after her heart surgery. So she weaned off the oxygen too eventually, and we've had the trach ever since, and we're actually working towards decannulation now because her malacia has improved enough that they don't feel like she needs the trach anymore. But we just have to do capping trials and things like that, which is occluding the trach and moving forward and proving that she can breathe on her own without having her airway stented open. So that is our story of getting the trach in a nutshell. So, but she's, done great with the trach. We've loved having the trach. It's helped with her development. It's helped heal her heart and her pulmonary hypertension. It's like one of the best decisions aside from, having her heart repaired and things like that we say we have ever done for her. So, yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rhonda. That's quite a story. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you sharing that. We're going to go over to Terry next. And Terry, you take it away.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you doing these. I think this is really important to get the information out to folks. And I'm Terry. This is my daughter, Christina. Chrissy is full trisomy 18 and 20 years old. She turned 20 in March. Christina was born, when Chrissy was born, she really didn't require any intervention. We had a little bit of blow-by energy, oxygen at the time, but that was really all that we needed for her at the time until she got her first cold. She came home from the hospital and around age 4 months, 3 months, 4 months, I guess somewhere in there, she got a bad cold, and we noticed that she was, we didn't know desatting from anything because, I'm not a nurse. I had raised 4 boys, but they kind of just happened all on their own. And there wasn't, if you're not a medical parent, you don't pay attention to those things. But our visiting nurse said, you got to get her in. She's got more going on than just this cold. And so we took her in, and of course we found out her sats were dipping out very, very low. And, we had been, we weren't given hope in the beginning when we got our diagnosis, like most. And we believed in her, but, we, of course, were terrified every day what was going to happen. And we had not had a lot of good input from our prenatal doctors, but we did have a pretty good pediatrician, but we landed in a hospital where he didn't go. And they came in and, they're looking at her, and the pulmonologist that came in was just terrified out of his mind because he was watching her stats go down. And to me, the way she was behaving was the normal occurrence. I wasn't recognizing it as apnea. And in fact, she had been having apnea. We just didn't know that for months. And so that's what her situation is she has obstructive apnea. So, there's 2 kinds. One is central and one is obstructive. And in our case, because it's obstructive, it's just clear the obstruction and you clear it up. And, we had made the decision early on, we weren't going to do any, quote, heroics. I was terrified of the idea of her going on a vent or even a trach, even as Rhonda mentioned. To me, my mom, when we lost my mom a lot of years ago, before Chrissy was born, she went in with pneumonia. They trached her because of airway issues. She went on a vent and she died. So to me, it was that was what that indicated, was kind of end of life type stuff. I didn't really know any better. So when they came to us and they said, well, we know you don't want to do any real heroics for her. We wanted to save her clearly, but we didn't want to beat her up, was how I was looking at it. And they said, well, what if saving her life means a trach? And looking back now, it's almost impossible for me to believe that we had to think about it, but you do have to think about it. We had to know what was what. And at the time she was too sick for them to actually do it. But, they said, and I, in my mind, I still thought trach was tantamount to vent. And we had decided we didn't want to do that. Not that I don't have any, I think these days I would think differently, but this was 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, typically the kids that survived were the kids that just survived. It wasn't because a lot was being done. It was not the norm to be able to do much in the way of medical interventions. And in fact, when they started talking about the trach, I started doing some research. Well, there was not much to be had. I contacted SOFT, and I'm not saying Chrissy was the first, but there was not any records within SOFT. There were kids that had been in the hospital and had a trach for a short period of time, or that were very, very ill and had a trach to try to, to get them on a vent. But there was no records really of any kids that had been trached for apnea, for obstructive apnea, just for a life situation. And so that was, interesting to us. But we went ahead and decided, yes, absolutely, of course we're going to do it. It took a little while to figure out the fact that, they weren't all the same, and realize we needed to do it. And so she had to be in the PICU for a while to get healthy before we could do the trach. And one of the things they wanted to do, they tried a few other things out. They tried the nasal trumpets, and which to me was like, well, she's not living like that. So check that one off the list. And they also they tried a CPAP, and they would put her on the CPAP. And Chrissy's a little strong. I think most of our kids are pretty, strong-willed. And that she wasn't having any part of a CPAP. She couldn't sleep. She wouldn't sleep. She screamed the whole time. And then after we went through a couple of days of torture, they said to us, well, if she is on the CPAP, she's going to have to be in a facility, because at this point in time, there are no masks, neonate size masks small enough for her to go home with the CPAP. And so at that point, it was like, well, then why are we trying it? Because she's not living in the hospital. And at that point, they pulled that, and we said, move forward with it. We got to do the trach, because that was our only option. We knew she needed to be home with her family, where she was surrounded by people that loved her and believed in her. So she had the trach. Of course, it made her more vulnerable for a little while. We went on with life, and, it was a lot of work in the beginning, but it leveled off to where, having her trach, first of all, is really no big deal. It's very simple. Because it is only for apnea, we have, it's a little different situation. Now she could possibly be weaned off and put on a CPAP. For us, what I didn't want was any situation where I had to make sure she was on a machine before she went to sleep. And that scared me. I wanted her to just be whoever she was all the time. And for us, that trach has been the answer, because it's just, she's capped almost all day long, except if she's sick, she's capped. So she's really bypassing her trach most of the time, but it's there at night. And if you could just put a trach in at night, that'd be great, but that's not how they work. And we just joke that she likes to have her piercings in strange places, and that's, where she chose to have it. But for us, she learned very quickly how to make noise past the trach. And, now like I said, she's capped most of the time. But it is to us a lifestyle. It's a decision we have made to not reevaluate whether she could. When they have reevaluated, her airway is still slightly floppy, slightly collapsing. And so for safety's sake, we've decided that life is good with a trach, and that's how we're going to go. So that is our story. And I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Terry. And we'll go to Jennifer and Mr. Danny. So their story is, well, I'll just let her share it, but there was a particular reason that I asked Jennifer to be on this panel.
Okay, our story's a little different. Well, I knew that at 31 weeks, we got Danny's diagnosis. So we knew that he had trisomy 18. He didn't need any intervention at birth. He had oxygen for 24 hours and CPAP for 24 hours. Stayed in the NICU for 3 weeks and came home. At 3.5 months, we had a sleep study done just because we were following the soft guidelines that we should get a sleep study done. He wasn't displaying any signs that we should. We were just going through right down the list of the recommendations by soft. If anybody who's watching went to last year's conference or Nebraska's conference and met Dr. Green, thankfully, Dr. Green is our ENT. So we are very fortunate. So we did the sleep study and we thought everything was going to be just fine and life was going to go on. Everything was going to be great. I got a call at work and they said, you know, we got the results back. Can you come in tomorrow? Okay. Well, scary, but we went in. Danny had quit breathing 67 times an hour on average. That was the scariest news I had heard because we didn't know. You couldn't tell. We had no idea. And so Dr. Green came in and he said, well, let's take his tonsils out. And I'm like, he's 3.5 months. Are you kidding? You know, I mean, who takes the tonsils out at 3.5 months? But we did. So the very next day, we were in surgery. We got his tonsils taken out, but when they tried to extubate him, he wasn't having it. He wasn't ready. So we waited about 4 or 5 days. They tried again. That time when they tried, he coded a full code blue. Our room went from 5 surgeons to 5 surgeons and 30 other people in a matter of seconds. With a full code blue on my 4-month-old, 3.5, 4-month-old baby. And Jim and I stood there as they did and watched as he flatlined and they did CPR. And if you've ever been through it, it's the scariest thing in the world, but they drilled the hole into his leg bone to do the direct IV. I have never seen anything like that in my entire life.
Jennifer, I think your audio might be, is it getting muffled for anyone else or is it just me?
Oh, was it gets muffled? Sorry. Is that better?
Okay, it's better. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, the drilling into the bone for the IV is the scariest thing I have ever witnessed in my life. I didn't even know that was a thing until I watched them do it to Danny. Finally, they were able to open his mouth. They couldn't bag him. They couldn't bring his oxygen back up. Finally, they were able to open his mouth, and he had taken his tongue and flipped it backwards and was blocking his entire airway with his tongue. They were able to, Dr. Green reached in, moved his tongue, and they were able to re-intubate him. At that point, our decision was made. He was getting a trach. At that point, it was, you know, if he could do that in that moment, he could do that in the middle of the night. He could do that again whenever. So, I mean, he made that decision for us right then. He was getting a trach. It didn't matter how much taking out the tonsils opened up everything. He got his trach. Best decision we ever made for him was that trach. From that point, you know, he got his trach 2 days later, and the difference in him, his color changed. My precious little boy that I thought nothing was wrong with, I suddenly saw that everything was wrong with. Just the color change. It was so dramatic. And, you know, I show people that ask me questions now, you know, other moms that are facing the choice. I show them the before and after pictures, and it's so drastic. But at the time, like Terry said, I didn't know. I didn't see it. He looked good to me. until I saw what looking good really was. But he did really well. From that point, we were only in the hospital another 2 weeks. We did our training. We came home. It was a pretty quick adjustment. We learned how to do everything. Life with a trach was pretty simple. We knew what we could do, what we couldn't do, how to do it. Life was great. Dr. Green was like, this should only be temporary because it's obstructive apnea, and it's just a matter of him growing. And I was like, okay, well, and then I was like, no, I'm not making that decision. I'm not making that decision. And then 2 weeks before Danny's 3rd birthday, that decision was taken away from me. Danny woke up at 5:30 in the morning, and I went to get him out of his bed. And he's leaning up, looking at me, smiling, and laying beside him is his trach. He had taken it out in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to me, and there the decision went. And I grabbed him real quick, and I grabbed the trach, and I grabbed the spare trach, and I tried to put it in, and the hole was closed. And I grabbed the smaller trach, and I tried again, and it was too small for that trach. And I grabbed my husband, and he tried. No such luck. So we jump in our car, and we drive the 2 hours to get to Dr. Green. And his team came in. They tried. No such luck. And then here come Dr. Green, and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. He just knew he was going to do it. So he grabbed the obturator, and he was going to put it in. He's going to get the trach in, the obturator, no big deal. Everybody else just wasn't doing it right. And no, it was gone. The hole was just gone. And so Dr. Green was like, okay, I'm going to schedule an alarm, and we'll get it in. And then my husband said, wait a minute, this has been hours. We're looking at like 6-7 hours that we know of that Danny hasn't had his trach in, and he's satting beautifully. Look at him. He's been throwing temper tantrums. He's doing everything, and his sats are great. So why are we putting it back in? And so him and Dr. Green had a discussion about, clearing his airway if he's sick or things along those lines. And we decided that, apparently Danny and God made the decision that that trach wasn't supposed to be there. And so we went through sleep studies, and Danny still has sleep apnea. And at night, he sleeps with the CPAP machine. He sleeps with what we call a scuba mask. It covers his entire face. Danny won't sleep with the little nose ones. Those ones he hates. Those are temper tantrum. But the scuba mask, it looks just like a scuba mask. It covers from the top of his forehead to under his chin. That's what he sleeps with at night. He loves his little mask. He leaves it on until he wakes up, and he's a happy little boy. And so I would not have made the choice. So the choice was taken from me. I say God and Danny made the choice for me, because they knew I wouldn't make the choice.
In fact, it was Dad.
Well, yeah, in the end, it was Dad and Dr. Green made the choice, because even then I wasn't going to make the choice. So that's pretty much our story. It's been 3 years. In September, it'll be 3 years. Danny will be 6 in September of this year. So it'll be 3 years that he's been without his trach now. And he's loving it. He gets to go swimming. He gets to do all his little fun stuff now. Well, that's our story.
Thank you, Jennifer. I remember when that came out and she posted, and everyone was like, what? And it's just great to hear he's doing so well now, and very interesting that wasn't the path that you chose, either going or coming, but here you are. And Deanna and Grace, and I'll say Deanna and I are new acquaintances, new friends, so I'm really happy that she's here with her sweet T13 baby girl. And our mutual friend Pam is who kind of hooked us up, and she told me that, Deanna, you had a job advocating for your daughter to get a trach, and so I'm really interested to hear your story and what you have to share with us tonight.
Yeah, so Grace is 20 months. She'll be actually 21 months on Friday, and she is our first child. So she was actually our little rainbow baby, and we were first diagnosed with trisomy 13 when I was 20 weeks pregnant. So we knew ahead of time. And because I'm older, they wanted us to do the blood work test, and it had shown up, but of course it was not conclusive. And until we went to go do her anatomy scan, that's when we found out that she actually had a CHD, a congenital heart defect. So they put 2 and 2 together, and they're like, most likely she has trisomy 13. So we did an amniocentesis to get a confirmation. And so we were another family that decided to leave California and go to Nebraska back in 2018. And so she was actually born in Omaha at the Children's Hospital there, or actually she was born in Nebraska Med, and then they transferred her. So they had told us that right when she would be born, that she would be intubated. And so they did. They intubated her immediately because they weren't sure of, her heart and if she would be able to, be stable. So because of her congenital heart defect, they told us that she would need surgery right away. So that was the issue. That was what we thought. We didn't know about any other issues. We couldn't tell if she, had any other problems breathing. Because she had been intubated right away. So we got her heart surgery done. She was 6 days old, and she totally rocked it. Very, very little, and a complex heart too. And so then we tried extubation, and she was doing fine. She was on some oxygen. We were on CPAP for a while, and then we ended up down onto high flow, and we were all the way down to low flow. But during that time, it was like a roller coaster for her because she would have these desaturations. She would be perfectly fine, and she'd desat to like the 60s, sometimes the 50s. And we'd have to, make sure she would take a breath, and, she would turn this dusky color, and we couldn't figure out, what was going on. But because we were weaning off of so many of the drugs from her heart surgery, we equated it to she was having withdrawal symptoms, because she was very irritated from a lot of the heavy drugs that she was on from heart surgery. And we went through everything. So that went on for some time. And then in the interim, we got her G-tube. And finally, as we got to the low flow, we just couldn't keep her sats stable. And so it ended up where we started backtracking. So instead of remaining on low flow, she ended up getting back on high flow. And then it was, nope, we have to put her back on CPAP. And then it was, now she's back to being intubated. And at that point, we're like, what are we going to do? Because we want to go home. She can't stay in the hospital. She's been in there since, she was born. And, we said that we would do almost anything for her as long as it was going to give her a good quality of life, after her heart surgery was done. So eventually, and they had done several bedside scopes with ENT looking at her airway, and it looked good. But it wasn't until she got a bronch done. And once they did the bronch, then they could see that she had the tracheal bronchial malaise. And it was lower than what they could see from their bedside scopes. So they talked about, trach was possibly an option, but then with the ENT, they had talked about a new procedure that could potentially be done, which was called something similar, I guess, called like a tenting, where they would pin the airway from the lungs, like to the chest cavity. And that would be, able for her so that she wouldn't have to get a trach. And my husband and I, we talked about it a lot, and we weren't really that comfortable. And once we found out that if she was going to have the surgery, they'd have to open her back up again, open heart surgery, and potentially also affect her heart and the work that was done there. So eventually we talked with her CT surgeon who worked really close with her ENT then. And at that point they discussed it, and her CT surgeon decided, like it would be really risky. And he confirmed kind of our fears, which would be if we had this done and it collapsed, which is a possibility that it wouldn't be stable, that we would have no secure airway for her. We'd have no way of being able to like bag her. And we could be at home, when this would happen. So, we had long decision, and they decided and they agreed after all of that and the discussions that she should get a trach. So at 3 months, she got her trach, and it was actually pretty amazing to see the growth for her and the strides she started making. She started reducing the amount of oxygen that she needed. She started gaining weight, tolerating her feeds better. And then we weren't sure if she was going to be on the vent, and she currently is on the ventilator right now because they considered her malaise pretty severe. But she's off of oxygen, and we're currently sprinting her. So when we transferred back home, before being able to come home, they left her on the hospital vent because they didn't want to wean her down to a home vent, considering we might have different equipment. And so we came home, we flew back, and back here in the home hospital, she quickly got to the home vent. And currently she's really on very minimal settings. Really, she just needs the pressure support a little bit to keep her airways a little open. She does all her breaths on her own. And really, it's been a lifesaver for her. And we were really scared. Having a trach and the thought of, am I going to be able to hear her again? What does this mean for us? How do we take care of her in an emergency? And what a difference it is for us when she's sick or we need something. I mean, we're able to manage so much at home and not be in a hospital. And it really isn't as bad as people, tend to think. And the fact that we're working on getting her off the vent and sprinting her, several times a day is amazing. And they told us, they said, she probably just needs to get bigger and stronger for her to eventually, get off this vent. And that's what it took. It took for her to be able to grow and to get her lungs to be a little bit stronger. And, yeah, it's an extra piece of equipment, but otherwise she wouldn't be here. And we're getting to the 2-year mark, and she's just a joy. That's pretty much our story.
That is so great. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing the stories. And I just want to open it up. I don't see any questions through the chat right now. And it looks like a small enough group that if you want to unmute and just be able to answer as needed, I think we can do that. I see Danny over there head banging. Me and Verity would be a pair. Verity does that too. All right. So any questions or comments?
There's something actually that I'd like to add to something we discovered and we believe is true since the trach went into place. And I think that probably all these mamas are going to agree with this. And, one of the issues, of course, in our case, Chrissy had a 2-vessel cord in utero. And we've always believed that part of the issue in her development was lack of oxygen even in utero because of the 2-vessel cord. now as being transmitted to her through the blood. But since she's been trached, the one thing about it is that when you have apnea, your sleep is constantly interrupted. You're not sleeping well. And we know that sleep is an integral part of growth and development. And I truly believe that that is part of why Chrissy's done as well as she's done. It's not just that she's safe because she can breathe, but that she's getting the adequate rest that she needs. And so that her development and her regeneration and all that can be taking place. And it's just, to us, that's just made a huge difference. And I think that that's, when we did the sleep study in the hospital, I kind of forgot about that because, again, we thought nothing was going on. People told me there was a possibility she could have apnea. And I'm like, nah, not my daughter. I'm watching her. She didn't have any problems. 132 times she stopped breathing in an hour. I mean, like, that's like not breathing in that hour. And so it was just terrifying but I had forgotten about that till I was reminded of it by Jennifer. Anyway, I just think that that's another important part is literally the therapeutic part of getting the rest that a person needs.
Good
not
point.
that I'm suggesting getting a trach just to sleep. I'm not, not making that recommendation.
There are other ways too, right? We have a CPAP for Verity, but I can attest to that too. I mean, she's made developmental leaps and bounds once she started sleeping. It was crazy. People didn't believe us that she didn't sleep, but I think all of us have been on that road at some point, right? Okay. I see. So, what, if any, complications have you experienced with having a trach?
I can just say, like, one of the cons and complications of having a trach are just, I mean, kids are more susceptible to getting some infections like tracheitis, bacterial infections. I wouldn't say that like Bella has gotten more colds or anything like that. I think honestly she's get sick less than my other kids because we're so vigilant about like germs and things like that. But she has had the occasional tracheitis with like Pseudomonas or another bacteria, but that's pretty much it. You can also get plugs with mucus, and that can be scary, especially if you have a kid that's really dependent on breathing through the trach versus being able to breathe out of their mouth and nose too. Where Bella, she breathes out her mouth and nose. It's never been completely dependent on her trach. But for probably some of the other parents whose kids may just be completely, trach dependent, a plug can be like a serious.
Yeah, we haven't had to experience a plug. That is definitely one of like our greatest fears, and I'm sure it's going to happen, at some point. I will say that Grace is colonized. She has Pseudomonas that we discovered in the hospital, and we have to do extra breathing treatments to manage it right now, and hopefully we're gonna eventually be able to get rid of it. But I mean, it's definitely problematic. So you're always watching out for that because you don't want it to get worse. Thankfully, there are medications, but then that takes time. There are the other complications would be extra breathing treatments that might be needed to do throughout the day. So if you're typically on a schedule where you want to do like PT or OT, you might replace that then with, extra breathing treatments that need to be done because you're managing, like for Grace, the Pseudomonas.
For us, we didn't have too many complications, I would say. Danny never had a plug. We never dealt with that, thank God. We didn't have any Pseudomonas or anything like that. He was colonized with tracheitis and MRSA, of all things. But the one thing that we did is that everything revolved around his trach, and just like we do with everything else, the season, from cold and flu season, the start to the end, we went nowhere because of his trach, because you are more susceptible to catch things. So we were extra cautious. But, you know, as Danny gets older, I'm less bubbly with him now than I was then. But, you know, I mean, his immune system gets stronger as he's getting older anyway. But, you know, with his trach, I really was like, you know, but I would change his cap every time we went somewhere, change the nose, you know. So it was like, in a way, it was kind of easier, you know, because I can't take off his nose and throw it away now. But, you know, when you have the trach, we were able to do stuff like that. So, I mean, I revolved everything around, you know, his trach and when and where we were doing stuff. You are hyper. Yes, you
Well, we got a lot of respiratory stuff when Chrissy was young. Obviously, she was, you know, she had 4 brothers going to the giant petri dish called school and bringing stuff home to her. But we didn't ever really separate her from things. We didn't deliberately expose her to stuff, but, you know, I mean, we didn't keep them out of her life. But one thing about it is when you have you can have the infections and that sort of thing, but you can also treat respiratory in a different way because you can get in there and you can suction it out and you can work with it. And so in some ways that was nice and easy. And so that made a huge difference. And I think for us, one of the big things is for people, just if it's something that's comes up in your child's life, don't be afraid of it. That's the most important thing. You know, it feels scary. I mean, when we're out, we'll have, you know, of course we haven't been out since the beginning of March, but when we're out, a lot of times we'll be out walking around and it's always most of the little kids, but the kids, you know, they just latch on and they just stare and they're looking at her neck and looking at that. And I finally realized they just need to know it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt and it helps her breathe. And then because that's the biggest social issue we have is people not understanding it. I've had adults that think it's her feeding tube. It's like, well, don't feed her, please, there. But anyway, so the biggest thing is you can treat a little bit better. Chrissy pulls her trach out a lot. She didn't touch her trach for years and years and years. And about 2 years ago, she decided that this twisting this and pulling it out was like the greatest fun on earth because it makes people jump. And so that's something we have to deal with on a regular basis. But fortunately, because it's, you know, as long as we get there before the hole starts to close up, she's fine because she can actually breathe without it. It's just the need for it when she relaxes and lets that airway go.
I do miss being able to clean it out when he's sick. So I will say that is one thing I do miss about him not having a trach is, you know, because he's been sick, you know, a few times since he's got his trach out, and I do miss that is, you know, not being able to, you know, because you use your shake vest, you clean it out, you know, clean out the airway, you're good. Yeah, I do miss that.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, what are some questions, the important questions that you would ask your medical team if the subject of a trach came up as an intervention? What are some important questions that parents might want to ask?
I would say, just like in our case, I wanted to have all the diagnostics done to know that a trach was relevant. That yes, we've had a bronch, we've had an airway evaluation. We do know that she has significant tracheobronchiomalacia. And on the flip side, for people who are advocating for a trach, you know, or don't know, you know, my child's struggling with being extubated or, you know, having these DSATs and respiratory issues, chronically ill and having to be admitted to the hospital constantly for respiratory illnesses. Have we had an airway evaluation? Have we had a sleep study to rule out obstructive sleep apnea? Have we had that bronch to rule out any malacia and airway issues? Also, upper airway issues. It's not always just in your trachea and your bronchial tubes. It can be upper airway in your, like in Danny's situation, the tongue flopping back. It can be because they have the small jaws that is causing issues when the jaw gets pulled forward, that can open up the airway, you know, just like when you do CPR, how you're pulling the jaw forward, that opens the airway. So, and they can have paralyzed vocal cords. A lot of kids that are intubated more than once, or even just once, can have damage to their vocal cords and cause paralysis. That can cause airway issues, extra tissue in their airway, in their upper airway. So, you know, the large adenoids and tonsils, things like that, can all cause like obstructions to the airway. So I would want to have all that stuff ruled out, or, you know, it brought to light if you do need a trach.
Any other thoughts on that question? The next one actually could be related, and that is, if your child has not needed a trach, is it possible they will later on? And Jen hopped in and typed that Dane got his when he was 15 months old. So Jen, do you mind unmuting and sharing a little bit about what led you guys to go ahead and get one for Dane? And then if anyone else wants to answer too, we'll have you pop in.
Okay. So when Dane was born, he only needed a little bit of oxygen, and he had a feeding tube just for feeding. We actually never had fed him early. And he came home from the hospital at 7 days old, just on a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of oxygen, and was doing really well. In time, needed a little bit more oxygen. We made it up to from 1/32 of oxygen to 1/4 of oxygen as he got older. But he also has severe pulmonary hypertension and an unrepaired VSD. So there were some mixed reasons why that could be. So he was doing well. He didn't get sick until he was 10 months old. And when he got sick, he had a double virus and ended up in the hospital just on high flow oxygen, recovered, and then 2 months later got sick again with another double virus and ended up in the hospital again on high flow. And we actually brought him home on hospice because we thought he was not going to make it. And doctors were actually shocked that he actually made the night that we brought him home. He was on 5 liters of oxygen, nasal cannula, when we brought him home. And we just kind of, through the summer, because that was in April, through the summer, we kind of helped him get better, nurtured him, made him grow a little bit. His oxygen requirements came down. But come August, he was still on 2 liters of oxygen and was having a lot of DSAT still. And we actually saw our ENT, and our ENT was like, Jen, why haven't you trached him? What's going on? And our pulmonary doc didn't even mention it to us. In fact, he said to me, I thought you were avoiding it. So always ask that question. Yes, we were avoiding it, but we also, if it's something that's beneficial, that we would have been for it sooner. And I'm a physician, so I kind of knew that he was possibly going to need it. So we actually electively trached him from home. We set up a trach as an outpatient and went in and had it done. And he was in the hospital for 3 weeks because he ended up on an oscillator at 48 hours old, at 72 hours post-op for Pseudomonas infection. So we ended up doing it electively because he was obstructing his airway. He had a lot of upper airway obstruction. His tongue was so hypotonic, it was just sitting in the back of his throat. And all the therapies we had done over the summer, it was getting better. But we knew going into cold and flu season that if he had another infection, that he was not going to make it. He's actually never been intubated outside of surgery. So we decided at that point that we were just going to electively do it. And it was the best decision we made because he made it through that winter, like, awesome. And now we're at the point where we're talking about doing capping trials and stuff like that to decide. He's just turned 3, so to decide where we're going to go from now in terms of his airway now that he's getting stronger. So we did it just because he was so weak. We were worried what was going to happen if we ended up in the hospital. So kind of a little different, but not so different than others. But it was a tough decision to go from home. Do we do this? Do we not do this? Do we just keep him secluded? But we have 2 older kids too, and they go to school. and they bring a lot of illnesses home. So we just decided it was the best for him. So
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question at all.
I know that was good. Any other panelists, are there any other reasons older kids might need to get a trach, or things that we should be looking out for as parents, maybe as our children get older?
Well, the only other instances I know of, and as far as, when they're older, is that, and of course, older in the trisomy community is a little, little different thing. But,
Right.
there are a lot of kids that I've known several that, in their teens, late teens, early 20s, because they start having respiratory issues, end up being trached. So, the other end of the spectrum. But, often that's, more of that kind of trach. The rest of us all talk about having been fearful, because they're doing it to help get them through and help them have a better quality of life, just like all of us. But yeah, it can actually happen. I know several that as they got a little older did require it. And yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up our first trisomy talk?
I know Heidi was asking about BiPAP and why wouldn't it work for for the kids or while they're on the vent. So kids that are on the vent can be on BiPAP or CPAP settings, just like the mask machine. And also the other reason a lot of these kids get trached and not go home on BiPAP is because or CPAP, because a lot of pulmonologists don't do it for little kids. So our pulmonologist here in Las Vegas doesn't do BiPAP or CPAP for small kids. In fact, I asked about sleep studies in Dane's first year of life, and he said there's no mask small enough for him. And CPAP and BiPAP's not approved by, the FDA for kids under this certain ages. So there's a lot of fighting that goes on, and especially the older pulmonologists. In Las Vegas, there's one pediatric pulmonologist for a whole town. So when you go in and you have to deal with just that one person, that it makes it hard. And I know Mary had the same issue at Rady's, in San Diego, where they don't typically do BiPAP or CPAP on young infants as well, or younger kids as well. They use oxygen to treat it, or they go to a trach if it's severe. So I don't know if that answers my question, but.
Well, with that being said, with Danny, those of you that have met Danny in person know that he's 5.5, but he's tiny. He's a little guy. And when we switched him, when he got rid of his trach, and then we did the sleep studies and found out that he would still need CPAP at night. In order for him to use the scuba mask, he was fitting the size infant, which is not rated for home use.
Right.
So in order to do that, he had to go through extra testing, which was saliva testing and all this other testing to make sure that he does not aspirate his own saliva in his sleep. And in order to do that, and I still have to get the masks, my DME does not provide them. I have to get them directly from my pulmonologist, who gets them from the hospital and gives them to me. So even though Danny is almost 6 and in the age range, I have to get him like black market, so to speak, in order for him to use them. And my pulmonologist had to actually argue and fight with the sleep doctor, because the sleep doctor didn't want him to be on it. And the CPAP machine that Danny uses is actually the Trilogy vent that most of our kids are on when they're on a vent, is the Trilogy. And he uses the same vent, it's just set on CPAP settings. So yeah, the face mask, he finally grew out of the infant and now he's in a small, but it's still not rated for home use. So I still have to get it from my pulmonologist. But yeah, it's like that a lot of places. They don't make them small enough for home use, which is ridiculous. Danny was 3. I'm like, come on, he's a toddler. But yeah, he had to go through all kinds of testing to make sure he wasn't going to inhale his spit when he sleeps. And
Okay, last call, last chance. If you have any other questions.
Beverly, this is Ryan, and I just wondered if anyone else has ever dealt with their kids doing like a clamping down where they just entirely stop breathing and get stiff and everything, because that's the primary reason that we ended up tracheing our son, was that was becoming very challenging to deal with. While he was in the hospital, he would do it a number of times per day, and every time he would do it, he would have to be bagged to open his airway back up.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Yes.
happened with Grace too. While she was going through her episode, she would clamp down and then she would desat. There were times where she ended up clamping down she'd desat to like 20 and turn dusky and have to be bagged, and a lot of scary moments in that NICU until we found out the reason. Yeah.
Danny would do it when he would throw a temper tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd hold his breath, turn purple, and pass out. Then he would start breathing again. So it was literally temper tantrums for Danny. Bagging him wasn't even doing it. The only way we could pull him out of it before he would pass out is to tickle him.
I had a typically developing kid that did that. So yeah. We
Yeah,
thought it was a big problem. They said it's classic textbook breath holding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Grace would do that too, temper tantrums. When we finally got home, and before we were going to actually have her be home from the hospital, we had a whole conference. They had to tell us, like, hey, are you prepared that when she gets angry and mad and she clamps down, that you're going to have to do this, because she's going to breath hold, and this is just her norm. And actually, we had to only bag her once, and thankfully, I feel like she's maybe grown out of it. We have not had that happen. So, when I cross my fingers, that does not happen anymore.
Cross my fingers, and I think Danny's outgrown it. He said, no. Wow. You better not, dude.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and spending an hour or so with us. Thank you especially to our panelists for sharing and being willing to open up. I love that about our community, actually, whether it's in written form or this maybe a little step outside the comfort zone to do it on video, which is recording for future viewing, Lord willing, across our fingers that the technology is working or will work for us. And then I want to share, if you're registered or if you're participating tonight, Adrienne Voyle, some of you know her sweet little Annalie is her Trisomy 18 girl, but she is donating a little Usborne book bundle for somebody tonight. So we're going to do a giveaway, and I'm just going to plug Adrienne, and you'll get her information. So I'll go through and we'll pick a drawing, and I'll announce it after the fact, and I'll hook you and Adrienne up for your free Usborne books that she has picked up for you. So Tiffany asks about sharing a rewatch link. Yes, we'll be doing that. Terry and I are in communication about the best way to make this available, but we will definitely do that. And then our June talk, we have a panel of feeding tube mamas, and I think we've picked out all the tubes that I can think of, but the NG, the OG, the G tube, the NJ, and the GJ, and I may have missed something, but that kind of covers the gamut. So if you're friends with folks that are like expecting trisomy kiddos, or they're in that new phase where, or sometimes, you have to change from one type of tube to another. There's a lot that goes into that, and I think feeding is a huge issue. So we're going to do that in June. So we'll announce the date and give you more information about that as it comes. All right.
Thank you so much, Beverly.
You're welcome. Thanks for
Beverly.
hanging out with me. Thanks for chiming in and your questions and everything to help make this good. We're officially finished. So have a great evening, and I'll see you in the groups.